a source folder where our files are. It has a test folder where it keeps the end-to-end tests, and it has some configuration files here. Let's first clean it up. We don't need the app controller spec, and we don't need the app.service. And nor do we need the app. It has a download them.
N I N I T I A เฮ้ย
them and install it here via their extension menu. So Nest.js has created a starter project for us. It has a source folder where our files are. It has a test folder where it keeps the end-to-end tests, and it has some configuration files here. Let's first clean it up. We don't need the app controller spec, and we don't need the app.service. And nor do we need the app.controller. And since all those files were imported into the app
ลบหมดเลยอ่ะ
app module, we need to go and delete them here. So for Nest, modules are very important. You see that this file, the global file, is called app.module.ts. This is similar to something that we have in React, where we have an app.js or app.ts file. So this will be the main module of the app that will import other modules. So I have talked about modules, but I haven't introduced what is a module. So for any concept related to Nest.js, you can just go into the Nest.js documentation, and it's on the nestjs.com, and you click on documentation, and you'll have this page where you will have a lot of docs on any concept that you want. And for instance here, module, it's written that it's a class annotated with the module decorator, and in fact we have a class.
Yo. Yo. Can you sing? I play Pokemon Go every day. I play Pokemon Go. Okay. You know this song? I play Pokemon Go.
I'm back.
I play Pokemon Go every day.
I play Pokemon Go.
A class called app module that has been annotated with the module decorator. If it's not annotated with the module decorator for Nest.js, it's not a module. And if you don't know what a decorator is, a decorator is just a function that adds some metadata to the current class or function that it is kind of decorating. So it just adds more property to that class. So if we go back to the modules documentation, we see that a module can import other modules, and it is the case for the application module, so the main module. The root module, it can, for instance, import user module, orders module, chat module, any module that you want, and every module can itself import also controllers and providers. We are going to talk about those a bit later, but for now know that a module can import other modules, and usually I like to organize my modules into feature modules. So if I have an application where, for instance, we have bookmarks, well, what would be the parts of the application, right? You will have the authentication logic where a user can create its profile, login, sign up. So for me, it will be auth module. Then you will have maybe user module that will handle the logic related to the user. We'll have also the bookmarks module and maybe the database module. So you see, you organize your app into those features, right? And you break it down into modules. And the result is that it makes your app much more easier to handle and to reason about. Let me show you another project I'm working on just to illustrate the structure. So I have a source folder, and you see I have an auth module, category, common, post, Prisma, which is a ORM for the database user. And if I click here, you see that you have some data, you have the module as we expect, and we have some providers. Those we are going to talk about it a bit later, but this is an example of a kind of production ready project. So you guys can see the organization and the code structure in a nutshell of Nest.js projects. Okay, so we now know that modules organize your app, right? And they are declared with a class annotated by a decorator module. So let's go ahead and declare another class, another module, to break down our application into those small submodules. So we know that we are creating a bookmark application. What would there be in a bookmark application? Well, I have already touched upon the authentication. So in our CRUD API, I want to be able to create users and to allow them to log in, right? So we will have an authentication module. So let's go ahead and create a auth module. And usually the convention is that you need to put the modules you create in a folder, and the only time that you can not respect this convention is when you're using the main app module component that will import all the other kind of modules or components. So let's go ahead and create the folder here, and let's name it auth. And at first I'm going to show you how to create it manually. When you're using a framework for the first time, it's better to actually write everything on your own and not use any generators, because Nest.js has a generator, has a CLI command that allows you to kind of automate that creation. And we're going to see that in a moment, but at first let's just write it by hand so we get a bit of a muscle memory going on. So we create a folder called auth, right? What do we know about modules? We know that it should be a class that should be annotated by a decorator module. So let's create a file, and we just respect that convention that if we have a file, we try to add its kind of function to its extension. So this is an extension, right? .gs is an extension, .ts is an extension, .cp CPP for C++ would be an extension as well. So here, since it's a module, it will be auth.module.ts, and we are using TypeScript for all the projects, so it's ts. And we need to create a class, so it will be auth module, right? And we need to decorate it with a decorator called module, and that decorator comes from the Nest.js common module, and we just need to open it, provide an object, and that's it. That's the minimum requirements to create a module. So all we need to do is to save, and that's it. We have created a module, and we have forgotten something important. We have forgotten to export that class. So if we don't type export, this class will be available only inside that module, only inside that file. We need to export it to allow other files of our application to use it. So we go back to app module, and now we can just import auth module, and we can use the TypeScript IntelliSense to help us to find our modules and files. So here it knows that the auth module exists inside auth. So all we need to do is to click here. If it doesn't appear, you can always do command dot or control dot, and it will propose you an option to import it from the auth module file. And here it is. To verify that our logic works, let's go ahead and launch our Nest.js application. So the bootstrap logic is inside main.ts. It looks a bit like what we could expect from a Express.js application, right? So we have the app that is being instantiated here, and then we launch a server on port 3000. I will use port 3333 because usually the port 3000 is reserved for React in my development pipeline. So I prefer to use 3333. I save it, and now I open the terminal in the project. Let me clean that out, and all I need to do is I need to do yarn start dev, and all we have is because so, and we don't have any errors, which means Nest.js compiled JavaScript file from TypeScript. We don't need to really worry. About it. It's just how Nest.js works, and that's it. We have our API working. So let's clean that up and come back here. So modules allow us to break our app down into smaller components that we can easily manage. Let's go ahead and create the user module and the bookmark module. In this case, I'm going to use the Nest CLI to create those modules, so you have an idea about how it works. Just open the terminal, and we're going to open a new terminal session, and we execute nest g for generate module, and we name it user. And Nest will generate the module for us and automatically import it into the app.module for us. So we have a folder user with a user.module class here, and we do the same thing with a bookmark, right? And it also generates a bookmark module for us. And if we check our terminal, let's kill this one, we see that the application is still logging. If I, for instance, press Ctrl Save, you see that it is recompiled, so everything is working correctly. Now let's add more logic to our application. So let's add the login logic. So when we build a Nest.js application, we usually separate our logic into controllers and service. We can refer to the documentation, and basically it says that controllers are responsible for handling incoming requests and returning responses for the clients. And providers or services are responsible for executing the business logic. So we separate our logic into controllers and service or providers to be able to simplify what we do, right? So let's go ahead and implement it. We go now into auth module, and we create a service and a controller. So again, the same can be done with the Nest.js CLI, and we're going to do it by hand the first time. So let's create a controller, auth.controller.ts and auth.service.ts. If we go to auth.controller, we need to create a class auth controller. We need to annotate annotated with the decorator controller. So Nest.js knows that it's a controller, and we need to do the same for auth.service. Class auth service. For the service, we need to annotate it with the decorator injectable. And that just means that it's going to be able to use the dependency injection that Nest.js uses under the hood. But more on that a bit later. And we need to, of course, export those, otherwise we will not be able to import those classes in our application, and not be able to import those classes in our application. And since we have added it, we need to add that to the module as well. So controllers auth controller, and let's check our application if it's running correctly. Okay, no errors. Cool, running good. So I've introduced the dependency injection, but I haven't really said what it is. You can of course Google it online, but let's go ahead and introduce it with a concrete example to see how it works. So we have a auth service class and we have a auth controller class, right? What is happening usually is that the controller will need to call the service. So the controller will receive a request from the internet, for instance, a post request asking to log in a user, right? And then it's going to call a function from the auth.service class and return its result back to the client, back to the browser. But to do so, auth controller will have to instantiate a auth service class, right? Because in the end, it's JavaScript. So if you want to create that instance, for instance, it would be service is equal new auth service, right? To avoid doing that, to avoid having to manage where it's created and who manages it all, we use dependency injection. That means that instead of our controller to actually have to declare it, for instance, to actually have to do something like that, give me the service here. Give me that an instance of that class, and I don't care how to instantiate it, just give me an instance. And this is how you do it in Nest.js. Private auth service auth service. And that's it. Nest.js will handle on itself how to instantiate the the auth service and how to pass it to you in that auth controller file. So you don't need to really worry about. And private here, if you have never seen that notation, it just means that. And then have to do something like this auth service is equal auth service. Instead of doing that, you just write private and you scrap off this. Function is not going to return anything. If we want, we can call this function directly like that, right? So that's dependency injection in a nutshell. If you want to have more information, just Google it. There's a plethora of explanations online how it really works. This is how Nest.js uses it, and basically it allows us to not handle dependency management, and it's just easier to work with when we have dependency injection. So let's come back to the auth service and create two functions, because our auth module will manage two functionality, login and sign up. So let's go ahead and create a function login and sign up, right? And that's all it's going to do for now. The auth service will store the business logic. Right now there's none. So let's come back to the auth.controller and create two endpoints, an endpoint for login and an endpoint for sign up. So the way to do it again is using decorators. It just simplifies how you write your logic. So we expect a post request on sign up and a post request on login. So we create a function, let's name it sign up, right? And sign in. And to make it a route, we just need to annotate it with a post decorator that comes from Nest.js common, and let's call it sign up. And sign in. And since we are in the auth controller, it's usually a good practice to put a global prefix route called auth. So when we are going to call that route, we need to do a post request to auth sign up, right? And if And if we call that route, it's going to be that request. Let's just return a string for now. I am sign up.
Oh โทษทีครับผมกำลังปิดไมค์อยู่ Green what are you up to I'm learning Nest.js sorry my microphone was closed totally forgot yeah I'm learning Nest.js Nest not Nest so this is next yeah that's what I'm doing okay
and here I am. Yeah, Insomnia is just a bit more minimalistic and easier to use, so let's go ahead and test our endpoint. And if you remember our auth controller,
I'll probably do curl alright curl x something curl post is there in JavaScript MJS you call it JavaScript I see curl post okay post okay HTTP localhost 3000 auth sign in I'm signed in Okay. Postman. So he used some
A
script.
source folder where our file
Did he use something? Oh,
did
he used Docker.
to run. It was any question is that
Insomnia? The hell?
good? Insomnia is
How is your experience with Nest so far? It's good. It's good. That's great. I'm not familiar with Nest.js. I'm more React, like Svelte. Svelte? Is it? Svelte? Svelte. Okay. Svelte. Svelte. Okay. Got it. The experience is good. Yeah. So, yeah, the experience is good. It can like separate the. How do I? Okay. It can separate the logic quite well. So, for example, what is going on? What? Postman is like, okay. So for example, you can like separate the logic such as controller and service. So you write the controller where the client can send a request. So you can create this like as an endpoint, and then you can write the logic in the service, you know. So you can separate things, and also you can separate into modules. So I have auth, so auth will just have auth logic, and bookmark will have bookmark thing, you know. So it's like Spring Boot typey thing, and it's good. So far so good. Insomnia. A program. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Download. Insomnia. Okay. So I probably create learn Nest.js, add requests. Okay. Sign in. This one 3000 auth sign in. Yep. Post. Sorry. That means the code will be less messy. I'm right. Yeah. So the code will be more structured. Yeah. More structured. It will be easy to find. So let's say that I want to know the logic of my authentication, right? So I know that the logic is here, right? And if I want to know like what are the endpoints, what are the endpoints that I can request, I can look here. So I know that there's 2 endpoints, you know. And this will be much better if we use Swagger. So yeah. And then there will be like a repository where you can do the communication with database, you know. So you can separate many things. So it's actually good. It will be less messy, but yeah, I'm just trying out as well.
is a HTTP client similar to Postman. You can also use Postman if you are used to it. Insomnia is just a bit more minimalistic and easier to use. So let's go ahead and test our endpoint. And if you remember, our auth controller was on the endpoint auth, sign up, and right, and we do the send request, and we see that we have response, right? I am sign up, and that is basically what we have written here, right? And if we launch and if we request sign in, it's going to print us the other response. One interesting thing though is that if we look at the headers, we see that it is powered by Express. So as I said it in the beginning, Nest.js uses Express under the hood. You can replace it by another framework called Fastify, but for most use cases you will probably use Express, and that's going to be just fine. That also means that everything that you know about Express, you can access it. So this is a nice thing about Nest.js. If you like Express.js and you need more structure in your app, you can use Nest.js and still have access to that Express ecosystem if you need. One other thing that is very interesting is that Express has sent us a content type of text HTML, right? So this is a text. So Nest.js will automatically convert the data type based on the return. So here it's a string. If I send a object, for instance, message hi or hello, and we send it to sign up, we now have a object, and the header is application.json. So that's very handy. You don't need to worry about sending the right data type. Nest.js will do it for you. Let's go back to our app and let's create
Hi, today I want to share with you the benchmark result for a comparison of two popular Node.js frameworks, Nest.js and Elysia.js. I will test them in different scenarios to evaluate their performance in various use cases. For this test, I deployed both frameworks using the most common setup for Node.js applications, running on a BAN-powered server for Elysia and a standard Node.js environment for Nest.js. I performed 3 separate tests to compare these technologies across different scenarios, aiming to understand how each performs in varied use cases. The first scenario is a baseline, and here is the third one. And this is the code for the Elysia.js application. I have put most of the code into the main index.ts file. Here is the first case, here is the second one, and here is the third one. Now let's take a look into the database structure. I created pretty standard user table. At this moment, Elysia.js failed a little fraction of incoming requests. And now I can see that Nest.js application has finally reached its limits. Let's wait for the Elysia.js to reach its limits as well. And finally, BAN application has reached its limits as well. Let's review the results. The clear winner in this test is Elysia running on BAN. It is almost 5 times less average latency than Node.js and almost 4 times better average P99 latency. But it consumes a little bit more memory. Let's move on to our second test case, which represents the real-world scenario with database selects. Right from the start, we can see that Elysia.js running on BAN is much faster and shows us better performance. At this point, I see that Nest.js has reached its limit. Let's wait to see what is the limit for the Elysia.js running on BAN. At this moment, both apps reached 100% of CPU load. Probably we will not get any more performance from them. Let's wait for them to start failing. And finally, we can see that Node.js app is starting to fail significantly. As we can see, BAN application is not growing its performance as well, so we can stop the test. Let's stop our test and review the results. So, in the real-world scenario, the Elysia.js running on BAN is 3 times better. See the result.
create more logic. So as I said in the beginning, the controllers will handle the requests. So it will fetch the body of the request if needed. It might check some headers or any work related to the request. Regarding the business logic, the actual execution, we offload that to the service. Usually the pattern is that we are going to create the same function on the service side. So let's go ahead and do it. We have a function now, sign up and sign in, right? And instead of returning something from here, we can actually call the service and we can put that message here, sign up.
Okay, let's go.
Hello. Let's write I.
Hello มาเราก็จะต้องโอเคอันนี้ sign in แล้วเราก็จะบอกว่า return message ชื่ออะไรmessage เป็น sign in ใช่ไหมแล้วเราก็ตัก assign up แล้วเราก็จะไป return this dot auth dot sign up ใช่ไหมแล้วก็ this dot auth sign in แล้วถ้าผม fetch ไปอีกทีฮั่นเนี่ยเหมือนเดิมแล้วถ้าเราไม่ return ล่ะเราไม่ return ล่ะไม่มีอะไรเพราะว่าคอนเทนต์นั้นมันจะไม่ return กลับไปใช่ไหมreturn ได้เป็นนี่โอเค
have signed up and sorry connecting to here.
ขอดู header powered by express utf8 powered by express deep dive into Nest.js expressว้าวเฟซเซอร์แอปพุกโอเคพัก15 นาทีก่อนนะครับเดี๋ยวมาต่อกันจัดไป โอเค let's go เหลืออีกกี่ชั่วโมงวะเนี่ยชั่วโมงหนึ่งสู้ตายสู้เว้ยอ้าวโอเคดีนะขึ้นมาไม่งั้นงานเข้าเลยว้ายreflowเอ้ย
responsible for handling requests. We know how a service works or a provider. It is responsible for handling the business logic, but it's so to use Docker Compose. Docker Compose will automatically allow me to spawn the Docker containers and to destroy them, so it's very handy. Let's go ahead and create docker-compose.yaml. So here's the configuration of our Docker Compose. I use version 3.8. In the services, we define our Docker container that we wanna run. It's going to be dev.db. This is just the name I give it to it. The image I'm using is Postgres 13, so we are going to use the relational database Postgres version 13. It's going to be exported on the port 5334. So if we connect to Postgres 5334 on our computer, we'll be able to access it. And the environment variables I'm going to use is the user rule is going to be Postgres, the password 123, as you have seen, very secure, and the database name will be nest. And it's going to be
I have a meeting. It was great seeing you live. Good luck. โอเคครับ ขอบคุณครับ Meeting at Oh my god. Meeting at 9. That's pretty late. Free code camp. Networks. Free code camp.
one, and we do
video. Sorry. Docker compose. I said build up. Is it?
so it's dev db, and we will run it in background, so with d, and that's it. And
Up dev db d. What? Docker compose. That's not right. Okay. So new version is there. Alright, let's download. Docker compose. Wait, did it already build?
if we go to docker ps, we see that
Docker compose build, I think. Build up. Wait a minute. Yeah. Docker compose build. Root. Okay. Service. I see. Yeah. Def db. Version service. Ports, I think. Version is actually obsolete. Okay, up. Docker.build. I mean Docker compose. What was the command? This one. Ship. Where restart? Update, restart. Wow! Twitching. BDC. This stock and bonds. Is this the prediction? So really crypto, guys. Crypto. Looking into my thing. Okay. Right. So this one. Okay. UB up.
that we have a container now that is running, and we can even access a log if we want. So docker logs, even deployed, it has compiled, everything is running correctly. Cool. But how do we access that? There are libraries like SQLize, TypeORM, Mongoose that allow you.
Okay, so docker ps docker combine. Huh? Okay, so it says it's already how about okay.
You to connect to the database, and I have been using for over a year now. It's called Prisma. So you can access the website on prisma.io. What Prisma is in a nutshell is that it's kind of a query builder, but it's so easy to use. So basically you define a model, for instance, that will be a post with ID, title, and all the fields that you want in the database, and you can get them from your JavaScript code or your TypeScript with that syntax, and we're going to explore it straight away. So with Prisma we are going to create the database connection logic, the database module in a way. So that means that we need to create another module, since the database module will be able to be used by auth module because you need to log in, sign up. It should be used by bookmark module and even by user module. So it's a new feature of our app. For Prisma we need to have two libraries installed. The first one is the Prisma CLI. It will allow us to create our schema and run migrations, deploy the migrations into the database. So it's more of a maintenance library. And the other one is the Prisma client. So Prisma has different clients. The one we're going to use is for JavaScript. So let's install Prisma CLI, yarn add, and we're going to add it as a development package Prisma, and yarn add Prisma client for the client. Okay, let's clear that out. With that being installed, and going to add it as a development package Prisma, and yarn add Prisma client for the client. Okay, let's clear that out. With that being installed, we now have access to the Prisma CLI. Let's run it. npx prisma init. And it's going to generate several files for us. First of all, it generated this .env file for the environment variables, and it just created a Postgres connection string by default that we're going to change a bit later. And it also generated that Prisma folder in the root directory. So what it just has its schema, and this is where we're going to declare our models. See, when you use a library like type ORM, you will create entities and you will place them inside your logic. For Prisma, there's only one place that you need to declare the URL. In the Prisma been created, it's going to be as well. We're going to store also the path so let's create two optional fields. First name is going to be an optional string, and last name optional string as well, right? We also have a bookmark, so the bookmark that we're going to save is going to have a title, is going to have a description, which could be optional, and we are going to have a link, which will be also a string, but will not be optional, because when you save a bookmark to a certain link, well, a link needs to be there. Here we go. We have created our two models. We save the file, and now you see it auto formats it nicely. Then we need to add the database connection string to our data. The user at that to access our log. If you have now when when we run Prisma commands, Prisma will be able to access our local, have the Docker app, the DAP API, press help out, it based through the browser. We're going to see that soon. But the one that we are interested at that point is Prisma migrate dev. What it's going to do is that it's going to read that schema and it's going to generate the migrations in that folder. So let's go ahead and run that. Terminal, clear, and basically says that, oh, and migrate dev, and basically says that, oh, you have added tables, bookmarks, and users. For those migrations to be applied, we need to reset the database. And it's usually common when you run migrate dev. It's only for development. If you need to push your migration to production, there's another command that will not delete the data. But for now, we can just delete it and we can press yes. And it's going to ask us the name of the migration. We can just say init. And now we see that it has generated a migrations folder, and basically it just generated some SQL. And when we run Prisma migrate dev, it actually does two other things. First of all, it pushes automatically that schema, that SQL to the database. So the database, if we go there and we check the logs, here we see that there's some command that has been run, insert into public users, created add, email hash. So Prisma has already pushed some migrations onto the database, so the database has the table. The tables of users and bookmarks. Prisma also does npm Prisma generate, and what generate does, and it's actually a very cool thing, is that it takes your schema here and it creates TypeScript types for your schema. So it creates the user interfaces or classes, and same for model, the bookmark interfaces or classes. So we can directly use those fields in our code. So we can go, and now we see that we have a user here, the user and the bookmarks as well, that are exportable as TypeScript types from the Prisma client. So we can use those types directly in our application, which is awesome, which is very awesome. We don't need to code that by hand, we can use it directly with Prisma, right? So let's come back to the schema and inspect our database with Prisma Studio. So Prisma gives us a very handy tool called Prisma Studio. We can execute it by typing npx Prisma Studio, and it's going to connect to the database at the URL in the NV file. Here we go at port 5555. We are now at the Prisma client, and we see that we have a user and a bookmark models, right? And we can go here and inspect our database when we'll have some stuff there, and we can even add records if we want. So it's totally compatible with the Prisma schema. It's actually quite cool. Let's discard the changes for now and come back to our code. We can leave that running, that Prisma Studio running, and we can come back to our code here. So far we have created the Prisma kinda migrations folder, and we have created the Prisma schema, but we don't have any way from our code to actually connect to the database. And
โอเคทุกคน น่าจะจบสตรีมเพียงเท่านี้เนาะผมไม่ไหวละ โอ้เยอะเกินวันนี้แต่ก็เป็นอะไรที่ดี แต่ผมว่าผมเริ่มเดรนละเริ่มต้องพักละผมมาวันประมาณนี้กำลังดีอยู่โอเคครับเจอกันทุกคนบายบาย